Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football, ranking the position groups for this Florida State program heading into 2024. And what I think is a fascinating conversation where you have a lot of new faces coming in through the transfer portal. And I think a lot of college football fans across the country, maybe casual fans, not necessarily that familiar with this Florida State depth chart, will look on paper and say, what, 10 plus guys moving on to the NFL? This is a team that has to take a step back from the 2023 season. I think a lot of the Florida State fans who are tuning in the middle of July are sitting there and saying, hey, Mike Norvell has not only done a really good job in the transfer portal, once again, bringing in a ton of talent heading into 2024. There's a lot of good players that are coming back from that 2023 team as well. Really excited to get into this conversation. Would love to hear some input from you guys in the comment section. Again, with a lot of new faces, there's a certain level of projection that we have to make. That is what the middle of July is for. Would love to hear some input from you guys. I got a few hot takes that I'm going to be getting off my chest. Would love to hear from y'all. If you guys do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. The Florida State fans, whether we're talking the recruiting trail, previewing 2024, you guys continue to show a ton of love to the boys. That stuff means the world. Would love to hear from you guys in the comment section. And without further ado, let's start with what I think is one of the best position groups, not only on this Florida State program, but across the country. That's the secondary. Now, this was a secondary in 2023 that not enough people were talking about, as it was one of the best units in the 2023 season. You start projecting it going into 2024, it's hard not to say it's going to be one of the better units across college football. Once again, AZ Thomas, a guy that was left off the top 100 list by EA College Sports, absolute crime, in my opinion. He has the potential to be a first-round NFL draft pick in 8 months. You look on the other side, say Fentrell Cypress, another guy that is probably going to be a top 100 pick in the NFL draft. You start sprinkling in some transfer portal additions like Earl Little Jr., some young safeties like Conrad Hussey coming back. I look at this Florida State secondary and say, I think your boundary cornerback spot is extremely good. Earl Little Jr., I think, just beats out Greedy Vance in spring camp, makes him transfer to USC. That must mean Earl Little Jr. is pretty good, because you look at Greedy Vance played some good football for Florida State. Then you look at the safety room. Not only do you have some veteran names, right? Shaheem Brown, Devontae Brown coming in through the portal. The best players I think could be in the safety room are guys like Conrad Hussey, who are going into year 2. I think this secondary room is one of the best units in the country, certainly the best unit on this Florida State program. I don't think that's a hot take. Number 2 might be a little bit of a hot take. I'm going to go to the running back room. What I love about this running back room is the amount of names and the amount of versatility that you have in this room, right? I think it starts with Roydell Williams. If you were to ask me who is going to be the leading rusher for this Florida State program, I'm probably going to lean to Roydell Williams, who you hear about spring practice, sounds like an absolute guy. True freshman Cam Davis. Keziah Holmes is a Florida State fan favorite. I'm really hoping he breaks out in 2024, because you guys continue to bang the table for him. I think the X factors, the reason I put this running back position group as the number 2 group on this team, Lawrence Tuafili and Jalen Lucas. We all know Mike Norvell is one of the best at scheming around his players. You have 2 of the more dynamic playmakers with the football in their hands in the country, and Lawrence Tuafili and Jalen Lucas. They're not going to be guys that get 20-plus carries a game. If you can get them each 5 to 7 touches during a game in creative, different ways where you get them out in space, those are 2 players that, have the ability to have those game-winning plays, those games that allow you to go 12, 13-0 like Florida State did last year. The combination between your all-purpose backs, guys like Roydell Williams, Cam Davis, and Keziah Holmes, and then you mix that in with Jalen Lucas and Lawrence Tuafili, at least the way I look at it, that's what makes this running back room so special. And I would look for Florida State to maybe do some 2 running back sets, get creative in terms of how you're going to run the football, because you got a lot of ball carriers that can do a lot of different things. Going to number 3, I'm going to go with the defensive line. Again, probably not necessarily a hot take. I think a lot of Florida State fans probably would have this position group number 2 on the team. Love the edge rushers, right? Patrick Payton, we know, is one of the, from a pure pass rusher standpoint, one of the best in college football. I think he can take a step in terms of the run defense, taking on blocks, getting off blocks on first and second down. again, Patrick Payton was a project. He's continued to get better every single season of his Florida State career. Going into year 4, you might really see him break out as being a dominant football player. On the other side, Marvin Jones Jr., I keep saying Jermaine Johnson vibes, right? Really talented edge rusher that just hasn't gotten the opportunity at Georgia. There's a chance he comes in and just becomes one of the better pass rushers in the ACC. My personal favorite in this room, Sione Lalea, coming over from Oregon State, probably not going to stuff the stat sheet like someone like Patrick Payton. Talk about a hammer in the run game. That's Sione Lalea. Now, I think the question is, do you have enough depth on the inside, right? I think we feel good about Joshua Farmer. I think we feel good about Darrell Jackson Jr. What's KJ Sampson look like year 2? Daniel Lyons is a guy that flashed in 2023. You're bringing Grady Kelly. If this Florida State defensive line plays to its potential, I really like the starting 4. I like the depth in the edge rush room. I think the big question you have is, what's the 2 and 3 deep look like on the inside of the defensive line? You got to rotate those bodies often throughout 4 quarters of a game, 12 plus games of a season. Do they have the depth on the inside to be that elite defensive line? That's probably the question. Any way you cut it, though, this defensive line is going to be very good for Florida State. Going to number 4, and it's the quarterback room, right? You bring in DJU, and when you look at DJU, I think for Florida State fans, what excites you the most is what he could be under Mike Norvell. We just saw Mike Norvell masterclass in terms of quarterback development with Jordan Travis, who legitimately, just like we talked about with Patrick Payton, got better every single year with this Florida State program. We've seen DJU take some steps from his Clemson days. Now, I think the question is for DJU is, can he take another step going into 2024? There was a reason that he was a 5-star prospect, the number 2 player in the country coming out of high school. Can he put it together on a little bit more of a consistent basis? There's not a throw that you can't ask DJU to make. I think the bigger question for DJU is not necessarily the top-end arm talent. It's the consistency that Jordan Travis gave you during that 2023 season. Can you get that from DJU in 2024? It hasn't necessarily fully manifested itself. There's a very good potential that it will manifest itself. And we're talking about the quarterback position being one of the better units on this team. That's what excites me about DJU. This is not some quarterback that you just bring in to be average. He can be a very good quarterback. You just got to see it on the field in the 2024 year. Going to number 5, and at least in my mind, a really fascinating position group to talk about for Florida State. A position group that Florida State fans know last year was probably the worst position group on the team. Now, that's not necessarily a knock on the offensive line. That's just name me a position group that wasn't good for Florida State in 2023. If there was a position group on 2023's team that I felt like wasn't national championship caliber, it was the offensive line. Now you go back and evaluate them in 2023, they were moving guys all along the offensive line. They barely started the same 5 in every single game throughout the season. A lot of guys were playing at 50, 60%. They were clearly playing banged up. So it's a hard position group to evaluate. What makes me excited about the offensive line is you return, 4 guys that played significant football for Florida State in the 2023 year. That's really important. You look at a lot of other Power 5 programs across the country, it's a rotating door in terms of the transfer portal. Florida State's got a lot of guys that have played together. I think it's headlined by guys like Maurice Smith on the inside, Darius Washington at left tackle, and then you're bringing 2 offensive guards, one in Richie Leonard, who has played a ton of football at a high level. Now, Richie Leonard is not going to be a guy that's a top 100 NFL draft pick, but he's going to be a damn good starter in the ACC. I think the big X factor is TJ Ferguson, a guy that could be one of the best offensive linemen that we see in the ACC. We just haven't seen him quite put it together yet at Alabama because we haven't seen him play a lot. Can TJ Ferguson be that guy for Florida State that gives you some of that higher upside on the offensive line? That's what I'm going to be looking for. This offensive line has consistently gotten better. And again, when you talk about people saying Mike Norvell can't develop, there's a lot of positions on this football field that you see players just get better and better and better over the years. Alex Atkins has done a phenomenal job with this group. It was a disaster a couple of years ago. Consistently has gotten better. Can they take another step in 2024? That's probably the question. Right now, I have them at 5, a unit that certainly could move up as the season goes along. Now, you talk about a unit that I just had no clue where to put them is the wide receiver room. I can see a lot of Florida State fans frustrated with me in the comment section. And quite frankly, I'm frustrated with myself. You look at this wide receiver room, has the potential to be one of the best position groups on the football field for Florida State. I just think sitting here early July, it's hard to put them in the top 5 or the top 3 because it's not a lot of proven commodities. But you start digging into this wide receiver room, Malik Benson, all the talent in the world, massive frame, runs a 10.4 in the 100-meter dash, a legitimate 10.4. You see that show up on the football field. Can he be consistent? That he wasn't quite with Alabama in 2023. Hakeem Williams, former 5-star wide receiver that we knew would need a year. Can he break out going into year 2? Ja'Kai Douglas is a guy that actually, I think, played some really good football for Florida State. Kentron Portier, big-time upside. Now, obviously, losing Destin Hill hurts. I look at this Florida State wide receiver room and say, Hakeem Williams, Malik Benson. I'd probably add a guy like Kentron as well. They have the juice to be first-team All-ACC guys. Can they become first-team All-ACC guys? That's the question mark. So this is a wide receiver room where we have met number 6 right now. We fast forward to this conversation in the middle of October. We could be talking about one of the better wide receiver rooms in the ACC. You just got to see it on the football field from this group. Going to our last position group, and I think the Florida State fans who've been rocking with the fellas for the last couple of months know that it's going to be the linebacker room. Now, I think you're bringing Cam Riley. That certainly makes you feel better. It's just a largely unknown. I think DJ Lundy's a stud, one of the best run-defending linebackers that you'll see in all of college football, quite frankly. Blake Nicholson, Omar Graham Jr., Sean Murphy, Justin Cryer. We haven't seen a ton from those cats yet. And when we have seen them, there's been some inconsistent play. Now, granted, guys like Blake Nicholson, they were true freshmen last year that had to go play a Georgia offensive line that was one of the best units in the country. It makes sense why they didn't look like all ACC caliber guys. We'll see about this linebacker room. I think it's by far the biggest question mark on this program, but there are some answers in the linebacker room. You brought in some guys who are veterans in the transfer portal, guys like Cam Riley. We'll see how it looks. I don't know where else you can put the linebackers besides number 7, but if they do figure it out, this team checks a lot of boxes on the depth chart. Not a lot of holes in this program. That's how I stack these position group rankings. I would love to hear from you guys in the comment section. A lot of different ways that you could go about ranking these groups. Again, appreciate you guys rocking with it. It's always a blast talking Florida State. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Appreciate you guys, and we'll talk to y'all later.